Hello and welcome to me not hitting the pause thing quite quick enough to stop the next video autoplaying. That was one of the tracks from the classic epic city builder Caesar 3. I thought that might be quite appropriate. And also now I want to go and play Caesar 3, but that's not what we're doing today. We're taking an early look at Imperator Rome, which is, well, it's basically EU Rome 2. This isn't the first Roman-themed game that Paradox Development Studios have created, but EU Rome is one of the more obscure titles, we'll put it that way. I don't think it ever sold particularly well, and although this game does take a lot of cues from that, it's at the end of it much more like the EU experience. Rather than, well, I mean, it was EU Rome, but it was a bit of an odd one. It didn't really feel like the contemporary game EU3, but this feels a lot more like EU4 than it feels like the previous game, if that makes any sense at all. But for some reason, they've decided not to call it EU Rome 2, I guess, just to avoid the association with a game that didn't do very well, even though they explicitly acknowledge in their notes that they gave alongside the review copy that it pretty much is the sequel to it. It's not a remake so much as it's supposed to be, you know, in the same vein. So, yeah, this one is one I considered doing a video on, but then I thought actually it'd be easier to do a stream when I'm looking at this. I'm in the situation where I think I was with... Was it Stellaris? I can't remember the last time I had a game from... It must have been Stellaris, where you can show gameplay, but we can't actually do explicit review content until, I think it's the 25th. So I have to be careful what I say, basically. This is going to be more focusing on the gameplay than what I think about the game. Although inevitably, you know, it's kind of hard not to play without giving some opinion along the way, but I will try to curb myself. So, what is Imperator Rome? Well, it is basically... well, if we go to the new game screen, we might not necessarily start a new game. I think I might just continue with the Rome game I've been playing. But basically, it is you playing... Well, the game is very geared around the player playing as either Rome or one of the other majors that existed at this time in 304 BCE. Although the date is mainly given in AVC, or, Ab Urbe Condita, from the founding of the city. So basically the founding of Rome itself, but when you mouse over in-game, you do still get the BCE figure, so you can kind of keep tabs on where you are. But yeah, it along with other Paradox games, gives you various suggested starting ones and some difficulties to go along with them. So Rome and Egypt are kind of like the easy ones. You've got Carthage, which is a little bit harder, kind of average difficulty, and Macedon is the same. And then of the two big ones it gives for hard difficulty, it's the Seleucids and Phrygia. There is also Myura, which the notes they gave us highlights as being a relatively easy start, but for some reason that's not on the recommended nations. This is the extent of the map, by the way. It isn't the whole world, so you've got Europe, the lower part of Scandinavia, you've got some of the Russian area, I guess. I don't know if that... Oh, that's all impassable terrain, actually. You can't... Okay, it doesn't really include any of Russia, then. And around the Black Sea and Arabian Peninsula, and then finally over to India. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up a game I've already been playing a bit, because I don't think it really makes a difference between me starting out and doing the same things I've done already versus me jumping into a game where I've played it for about 50 or 60 years already. And I've actually had to go with several games as well. There's different sorts of governments, as with, well, you know, EU4, you know, and CK2 and other grand strategy games of this type. So I can maybe quickly show you, at least from the loading screen. Caledonia, this is one where I picked one of the British tribal powers, and most of the people, you know, most of the, you can't really call them nations, most of the peoples in the game are organised along a tribal fashion. And in this one, well, I cheated my ass off. I used the command console to speed things up a lot because I just wanted to see what kind of options were available. And if you're not playing as like Rome or Carthage or whatever, I suspect they have a lot more events for them than if you're playing one of the more minor tribal powers. So I've gotten as far as being actually quite civilized. I've started colonizing Ireland, as one does. It's the British thing to do after all. And what's the screen I'm looking for here? Government, I think? Yes. I've gotten as far as creating myself as a... it doesn't actually show it there. A democratic republic. Which I don't think is actually a thing you can reform yourself into if you're playing as Rome. But yeah, this was just me, testing out various things and trying out the tribal mechanics a bit, and it's playable. It's playable, but it's also gotten to the point where I'm twiddling my thumbs a little. But what we are going to do is load up my Rome game and play that a little bit instead. Tree Shaker Tucker with Twitch Prime sub. I completely missed that. Thank you very much. And a follow as well. That's me. Yeah, you're wondering why it's scrolling. It's because the mouse is off the edge of the screen. One nice thing I'll say right off the bat, I think this might be the first Paradox game, apart from Stellaris. This is the first grand strategy, set on Earth, where you can use the WASD keys to scroll the map around, which is really nice. You still have the other keys being of various map mode shortcuts, as you can see, but yeah, for the longest time in other ones, if you wanted to use WASD, you couldn't, because those were all bound to the various map mode hotkeys. So that's nice. That's just a nice little feature right there. So here I am. It's Rome. I've been playing for it might even be 100 years at this point. When is it the game starts? 450? I don't know how this compares to the historical republic at this actual date, but yeah, essentially the game notes say this themselves. It's pretty focused on map painting, as it were. I mean, it is a game about the rise of Rome, or well, potentially other major powers that you can try and conquer the Mediterranean with. But I think this initial release of the game is very kind of Rome-centric, which kind of makes sense. That is the name of the game, literally. So let's unpause it, and I'll show you where I've gotten up to. So yeah, I've conquered most of the Italian peninsula. There's some things I didn't figure out until relatively late on, so I'm now at the stage of trying to play maybe a slightly more diplomatic game, because this is what Rome did. They didn't just conquer everything. Diplomacy was also an important part of the Roman playbook, getting tribes to be on your side. So this settled tribe here, for example, the tribe of Ilvatia, they are at this point my vassal. But it's a bit of a long process getting to that point. I've also got a couple down here that started as my vassal. This is like the one rump province left of a previous Italian state that I've not got around to conquering yet, and I might even just try and vassal them as well. There's also a couple of the Hellenic settler states that are left as well that I may or may not conquer. And I'm getting messages, and people want to have my stuff, because trade's a fairly important part of this game in terms of actually making cash for your state. But yeah, I've also done a fair bit of conquest, and it's very like EU4 in a lot of ways, but it's they've kind of they've very much gone with the streamlining philosophy that we saw in Hearts of Iron 4 versus Hearts of Iron 3, and I suspect that might not be a popular choice with some people. So let's find somebody to, I don't know, conquer, I guess. Veneto, I am currently trying to win over. Although at the moment I have this -1000 modifier of planning your demise, and I don't know if that means they're plotting against, like, specifically the leader of Rome, or if this is just they are hostile towards me and are planning to declare war at some point, which would be frankly quite suicidal of them, but they might try it anyway. I don't know. But what we'll do instead is pick on Crenomania, who are another settled tribe, so, you know, filthy, uncivilized savages, etc., etc. And they are allied with Caturgia? Caturgia. So if I get it to actually highlight who that is. Oh yeah, they're over here. Okay. Yeah, the things can take up quite a lot of the screen, so you end up with like this tiny little... You're trying to figure out where something is. It highlights it for you, which is nice, but it's sometimes a bit of a fiddle to figure out where it's highlighting exactly. So what we're going to do is we're going to fabricate a claim, which is an extremely simple process compared to previous games. There's no waiting around or anything. It's basically, if you have the mana points, as they are called in the community, you click a button and hey presto, that's it. I have a claim. It's that simple. We can also call down an omen from the gods. Yeah, there is a bit of religion stuff in this. This is... Oh, let's see. Yeah, you can basically have various boosts. And again, it's spending your mana points. In this case, religion points. We will go for discipline if we're about to go into war. A lot of it, like if you played EU4, the actual mechanics of armies and occupation are incredibly familiar and similar. Because they're, pardon me, basically the same thing. There are some bits of, say, Victoria 2 mixed in. A little bit with the trade system. But also there are various, click on Rome itself, different levels of pops, as they're called by Paradox, different units of population. So the four basic types are slaves, tribesmen, freemen, and citizens. And they all do different things. So slaves and tribesmen generate tax. Tribesmen can generate a bit of manpower. Your freemen mostly just generate manpower. And your citizens generate research points and commercial value, which isn't the same as tax. I haven't quite figured out what commercial value is in terms of how it contributes to your economy. Can you select different start dates? No, it's one single start date at the moment, Hildebrandt. The DLCs later down the line might add different start dates. I think this is a game for a with a lot of scope for different things they could do with DLC. But yeah, for the time being, it's just you start when you start, basically. So I'm marching my legions into place. I don't actually have that many men under arms at the moment. But what we'll also have to make sure I do is have my army maintenance set high, so I can actually have a morale boost at the cost of extra money per month. But we've got a lot of money. I could even throw some mercenaries. Because like CK2 mercenaries, well, in EU4 as well, you could hire mercenaries. But it's a lot more like CK2's mercenary system. And you get this screen here, and you can basically just hire mercenaries. Because if you're wondering what these stacks of things are, that's mercenaries. They generate in various places, and it also seems like the higher the population of a region rises, the more these mercenary companies, these mercenary armies grow. Oh, we've also got technology advance. The technology system's very simple. You assign researchers. And we actually need to assign a researcher. In fact, let's just go with him as the best possible person right now. I'll cover characters a little bit later, but we're just going to try out a bit of war first. Oh, okay, and an event pop-up, because, you know, it's a Paradox game. You get lots of event pop-ups. So, an army, a group of soldiers, has been looting and pillaging, which is not very good, so we're going to decimate them, which actually costs some general loyalty and some manpower. And does it actually... No, it just takes it off your manpower pool. It'd be kind of cool if it took it off your legion and it had to reinforce, but it doesn't do that. So yeah, we have various different kind of technologies. It's literally... I'm not too sure about the tech system, to be honest. It generates points as it goes along, which is like any other Paradox game pretty much. But it gives you... 3 possible choices for each one, but it seems like every time you advance a tech, it overwrites some of the existing techs you have available to research with the newer ones, and you can only then access the older ones by researching all the newer ones first. And beyond a certain point, you're playing catch up because your tech advances far outstrip the amount of the relevant civic power points that you're getting to actually research them. So I don't know, they might want to rebalance that a little bit, because it's not like you can even pick between all the different military ones you have available. No, it's just the 3 kind of newest ones. Right, so as we are... That's actually a really useful one to have right now, plus 5% discipline. Let's go for that. So that's immediately applied. It's very much like a lot of this game is you click a button and the thing instantly happens, which is a bit unlike previous Paradox games. There's no wait timers, there's no die rolls involved. In fact, the only die rolls I've been able to find really are to do with combat, which seems very largely taken from EU4. Right, they're going to have... Oh, yes, just the one ally, and I've got my... subject vassals. There's different types of vassals. I don't know how to get people to do different vassals. The Senate doesn't necessarily approve of this, so we're actually going to get 5 tyranny points, which will decay over time, but I'm going to suspect if your tyranny goes too high, bad things start to happen. I've not actually tested that out yet. So we'll click on the diplomacy map mode and we'll see that, yeah, they have actually... So let's march my army up here. You'll notice all these little spider web of roads, by the way. There's kind of an alternative tech tree, or a different tech tree, the military traditions. And every so often, once you've accumulated enough military power, you can select one of these. And one of them is the ability for your armies to build roads, which vastly speeds up movement. And that's interesting, because unlike... basically every other previous Paradox grand strategy game where you would go to the province and you would build infrastructure, which you still can do, but it's quite simplified in a way compared to the EU series. It's a lot more like the Civ games where you have your units directly build infrastructure. So that's an interesting choice. And in fact, I think it was Civ 3... I want to say, where... Oh, I actually might send my bigger legion to do something about that army. Where it was a special feature of the... why aren't we taking... occupying that... I don't know, maybe because there's a fort next to that. The fort mechanics are like EU4. But yeah, Civ 3 had the ability, if you were playing as Rome, if you had the legionaries... if you had iron available, they could set down roads. Can you actually change government types? You can, if I go to, I think it's decisions. Now this is all I have available at the moment. I don't think we can go back to being a monarchy. Oh, no, they're using my own roads against me. Curses. It's fine though. I think they're going to try and attack this army here. No, they're not. I don't know what they're doing. Okay, you'd think they'd go for the army they outnumber 3-1, but apparently not. At the moment they're just marching around accumulating... Yeah, yeah, governments... yeah, you do it through the decision menu. It's how I became the kind of Republic-style government for Caledonia. And they have certain... Like, you have to have enacted certain government laws, which is here, which all have various different effects. They don't necessarily change the nature of your government, they just give you different bonuses. But if you want to change the nature of your government, you need to change some of the laws, essentially. Now, I can't march directly into that province because there is a fort somewhere nearby which is exerting control. In fact, it's probably in that province itself. So we're basically going to have a fight in Cremona. And here's the battle screen, and our troops are just vastly better quality than theirs. We actually have... where are we? You can pull up a nice screen here. It's actually quite useful. It tells you the various bonuses that all different types of troops have. So as I've researched different technologies, and also from some of the government laws and such forth, it gives... and also trade goods, actually. You'll see there, surplus of iron and capital plus 10% to heavy infantry discipline. If you have a surplus of some trade goods, that actually helps you in terms of your military or economic capabilities. It might make your population grow faster. So yeah, trade's an important part of this game. It's not as involved as being, say, a trade republic in EU4 or CK2 even, but it's still fairly important, and it does bring in a fair bit of income. In fact, I think my tax is 39 gold a month, commerce 54 gold a month. So far commercial revenues have seemed to be the ones that are the much more important. So we're sieging. Why isn't that showing? Okay, this is slightly odd. In this map view it should be showing that I've held those provinces, but it's not for some reason. I don't know what's going on there. I mean, bear in mind, this is a preview version. This is a review code, so it's a little buggy. I've had one or two crashes in places, and there's also one or two graphical glitches I've noted as well. I don't know what prompted the crashes. I've not actually reported them to Paradox because I couldn't figure out why it had crashed. It just crashed. So that enemy army's been forced to retreat all the way back to Allied territory, essentially. Talking of Allied territory, now you've noticed I've got control of this province. That's actually my fort that's built in this province. Is one of the 4 types of buildings that you can have. It automatically exerts control over the surrounding provinces in terms of it then actually means that you control that province if it's given enough time. I don't think that works that way in EU4, but you can see they've actually got control of one of my provinces that way as well. I don't know why it's not showing me occupation, unless it is... Oh, I think it is. Ah, yeah, you can just about see it. Now, it is showing me the occupation stripes. It's just the colours are so similar that I can barely see it. You probably can't see that at all. Okay, we're going to have it on the more geographic map mode, but you still get the map borders. I tend to prefer the political map mode myself. Right, we've won that siege, so that's fine. We've almost fully occupied this territory. But you know what? We could, if I send... we'll actually wait for that then. We'll position this army. Let's have them... Let's just station them kind of nearby-ish. Stick them down there. If you have any other questions, by the way, if there's something you'd particularly like to see, I mean, I know I'm just showing off war at the moment, but yeah, it's got a reasonable amount going on, this game. I think, like I said at the start, it's rather streamlined compared to other games. But I think, honestly, and this is coming dangerously close to review opinion, but this is definitely one of the better polished PDS launch titles, or more polished at launch games that they've put out, compared to how Stellaris was, and to some extent how Hearts of Iron still is. Right, we're getting, there's a kind of, much like CK2, and with the various characters that are prominent, the prominent family groups of your nation. You can owe favours to people. The state can owe favours. So somebody is offering me, where are we? A gift, basically, of a morale boost of a little bit, and we will owe them a favour which they can call in later on. But we can also say, no, we don't want that. That does have a cost with the party leader of the military faction, though. Basically, any kind of republic has a kind of different, like these 5 factions, and their power can vary over time, essentially. And the different factions can make different demands on you. And you can try and directly intervene as well. You can spend your power points at the cost of increasing tyranny if you want to stack the deck. But I've mostly not found a need to do that so far. So I'll actually speed this up a little bit. And siege is 1. And actually what we can do is we can go straight to sieging that fort, because that will, of course, get me the surrounding provinces as well. You can see there's some of my vassal troops fighting. I'm actually going to win that fight before my troops get there, I think. Much like EU4, having some vassals is actually quite useful, because they will contribute maybe more troops relative to their size than you would be able to effectively raise as extra troops if you then took that territory directly. My voice is going already, that's not good. I mean, that's this 5 province vassal here is actually throwing kind of like 15k troops extra into the mix, which has actually been quite handy in some of the wars I've had. So yeah, there is a point to vassals. Although one thing you cannot do, unlike EU4, if I wanted to sue for peace right now, if I click on here, basically it's conquest or white peace. There doesn't seem to be any way you can defeat someone in a war and say, right, you're my vassal now. Yep, more trade route offers. So that's a bit, I'm not sure why they've made that choice. That seems a little bit counterintuitive. But that's just how it works at the moment. It's conquest or nothing, essentially. Although I've also, already pointed out there are diplomatic options as well that don't involve war. So we can actually speed this up even more. This is just sieging at this point. So yeah, this is basically the EU4 siege system. You've got all the modifiers. Commander, if it's a blockaded port, that makes a difference. You've got the fortification level there. More forts equal a bigger minus to that, so it'll take longer. And I actually was over too quickly. And then you've got the siege ability, you've got breaches in the walls, and then you've got the dice rolls and the different phases. And that is, it's basically a copy-paste from EU4, which is fine. I think a lot of the reason why this does feel more solid than previous launches is that this is much more familiar territory for Paradox. This is not anything especially new. There are some different design philosophies on display here compared to previous Paradox games, but mechanically it's pretty familiar stuff, and therefore I think it's come out of the box in a much more solid state than other games where they've tried for different or more complex things. I mean, Stellaris was unlike any game they'd made before. Hearts of Iron 3 wasn't, but it was a rather marked change from... I mean, it was sort of basically built from the ground up compared to Hearts of Iron 3. So this is one of those random events, which is actually a positive event for me. I just get some bonus economic output. And we can have another invention. So let's go with national population growth plus 0.05%. A lot of the technologies are just these small percentage modifiers that accumulate over time. And you can see them like in my religion screen, for instance. I've only got 71% religious unity, which does have an impact on my omen power, and just on its own I would only have about 70% of the base effect, but because I've got various technologies and the actual, even just going up a level in the religious technologies actually affects that as well. So it's actually 125%, and I've got a bonus 10% duration already. So we're at 100% war score. We've fully occupied both of these people, and even though I only had a Cassius Belli, you know, a claim on one of them, what we can do is just essentially take all of their territory, and that only cost me 11 aggressive expansion. I think the most I've grabbed at once was gobbling up about 3 tribal nations. I'm going to have to use nations. I can't think of the other word to use. But yeah, that got me up to about 30. And I think it's 50 is the magic number. If you get above 50, I'm guessing you start to... I don't know how it works exactly. You know, I don't know if you get coalitions against you, if it's like EU4 or CK2. And you start to get... infamy points really stacking up against you, or I don't know, maybe people are then much more likely to declare war on you if you're trying to expand too fast. But it's not been that hard getting rid of it, so I don't know, you can still expand fairly aggressively. So we have taken both of those are now proper Roman clay, and we have this option, and this always happens when you conquer somewhere. We can basically kill all of the named characters. You can banish them and kill some people. You can imprison the named characters, or you can individually choose. And this is basically like the elite families of the places we've just conquered. And I usually take this, banish those of class, and put the rest to sword option, because it automatically and immediately gets rid of a bit of your aggressive expansion penalty. So we've gone down from 11 to 10. Now this does have a negative effect on my relations with other people, including my vassals. So that's a reason not to hammer that too hard to begin with, because if you have any diplomatic relations, if you're trying to be friendly with anybody, like for instance Veneto, if I look at them right now, that is minus 44 from aggressive expansion. So yeah, but they're already at minus 1,000 from that other thing. So yeah, that is how you do a war, and it's basically the same for everybody. And the mechanics aren't really particularly different if you're tribal, for example. The way the armies are raised works a bit differently, but otherwise it's pretty much the same thing across the board. Quintus Marcia, or Marcia, I don't know how you'd... Marcia, in his capacity as general, has begun using his own personal funds to augment the size of his assigned army. So this is a thing that can happen. And it ties into heavily into civil wars. Your armies can become loyal, and navies as well. They can become loyal to a particular general, and as long as that general is a good, loyal Roman citizen, then that's fine. But if that general then starts to think, well, maybe I should be the leader instead, at that point that might be a problem. So in this case, we could get a couple of light infantry cohorts for free, but we don't actually want those, and he'll only lose 10 loyalty, so we'll actually decline that. Now we do have a governor needed for the region we just conquered, Transalpine Gaul. And we're now going to pay a little bit closer attention to the family system. Now, if I bring up the character screen, which is, I don't quite know which one's which yet, it's somewhere. Characters, there we go. Basically, you have the noble families, and when I was playing as Caledonia, there were a small handful of them, and it was actually a lot easier to manage them. And it'll be the same with any of the other tribal powers. If you've only got a couple to deal with, then it's fine. But essentially, if they aren't receiving a certain portion of your state's funds, and it actually gives you the exact thing in the tooltip, a respected family must earn at least 2% of the state income between its employed members. All of its eligible adults are employed by the state, they will also consider themselves respected. So basically, they are content, they are fine, they're getting their due from the state, they're not going to be a bother. If that's not the case, you essentially get a minus modifier. If we click on this guy from this family who isn't one of the respected families, he's one of the scorned families. And I'm not sure where I see this exactly, but essentially his here we go, his loyalty. So it's still going up a little bit every month, but you can see there minus 0.1 from being in a scorned family. And so you know, if you get that modifier going along with other modifiers that can affect a character's loyalty, then that can be a problem. So, yeah, you can see the different various families, and you can see all the individual characters. But unlike CK2, you don't do a lot of direct interaction with the characters. There is a little bit, and you can actually do what you can do in CK2. Right-click on a character portrait, and various options will appear. And some of them will require Senate approval. So at the moment, for instance, if I was at war, I could appoint myself dictator, or I could appoint this character a dictator. Because I'm playing as a state, I'm not really playing as the character. I could also hold a triumph for, in fact, we could do that for one of these characters here. Oh, no, apparently it's been too long since we won. I guess I was just on such a fast forward speed that... oh, no, there we go, okay. We can hold a triumph for this character. For some reason we couldn't do it for the other one. So we can hold a triumph, that gets approved by the Senate. They gain some loyalty and popularity. And there we go. So that's a, you know, that's a direct character interaction, one of the few that there are. You can also imprison people. You can try and smear people's reputation. I think you can even try and assassinate characters that are causing trouble. And you can even bribe. You can essentially, like if somebody has too many loyal cohorts, you can, let's see, this might be someone we can try that with. You can reward veterans, and it removes that loyal cohort modifier. And if you get, by the way, as an extreme of the loyalty system, as an extreme kind of example of it, if it gets too low, you lose control of the army that person is actually controlling. They just go off and do their own thing. So the loyalty of your generals is especially important, and to a lesser extent the loyalty of your province governors. Because one of the things you can actually do with armies, and I've not done it yet, but one of the options is if an army doesn't have a general assigned, you can actually then assign that army to a particular province. I don't really have a need to do that yet, but I can see that being a very useful mechanic for, let's say, if I controlled all of this area, and suddenly if I was micromanaging every single army, that might be a pain. So instead I can assign an army to a province, and the provincial governor gets to use that army to do things like defend the borders, defend against barbarians, or just rebels. But of course that comes with the risk of they then might use that army against you. So yeah, there's a lot of various different things going on. And I think the streamlining at this point of the game, it maybe almost feels a bit too streamlined, but then on the other hand, when you're trying to manage something the size of the historical Roman Empire at its peak, actually that streamlining might come in very, very useful. Right, so we have 4 scorned families at the moment, so we will try and appoint a governor from one of those families. And, well, it'd be nice if it would flag for you when you're... There's various bits of the UI I think could use some minor improvement, but for the most part it's not too bad. Well, we could go with this guy here, but he's 73, and so he probably won't be in the post very long. But actually, yeah, we will go with him. And oh, I've clicked on the wrong person. Oops. I think that shouldn't... I think I can just change that without any particular penalty. I think the governors of the different regions are largely autonomous. They will set their own regional policies, but you can override that at the cost of getting some infamy points. And I think what kind of policies they choose depends partly on their personality, but also partly on things like if they're trying to convert province culture, for example. So a lot of these northern Italian regions I've taken are actually Gallic in culture. And, of course, we want them to become more Roman. And similarly with religion, they are Druidic and we are Hellenic. Anyway, so we've got one of our offices of state unassigned, so we'll do the same thing and see if we can get somebody in from someone who's reasonably able, but also can maybe get rid of that scorned family modifier. And this is where it becomes a bit trickier with having a lot of families, because you've always got some that will have that scorned family modifier. You can't necessarily satisfy every single family. So 6. He's not great, but we'll go with him. I mean, you'll have noted that their characters have their own, much like CK2. You know, they have their own different stats based on the different mana types. I keep calling it mana, but it's been called that by the community in other EU games for a very long time, so it's kind of a hard habit to break. But the different kinds of power, and they tie into how good they are at different aspects of things. So for the different offices of state, they correspond with different power types. And so in this case, he's not great at it, but he's not terrible. We get various bonuses from that. Please tell me your character is called Biggest Dickus. Sadly, I actually did have this thought. You cannot rename characters. I mean, if they did that as an Easter egg, and this is Paradox, it's not out of the question, but if they had that as an Easter egg, where you could get a province governor, or just even a character popping up called Biggest Dickus, that would be hilarious, but I don't know if they would, that might be a bit on the nose for them. Right, so because our... actually, what we might do is, rather than marching these legions back, I'm going to temporarily split this legion, and we are going to use them to build some roads. And this is how you build roads. You click the Build Military Road button. It costs you 10 military power, and you click into the next province. And sadly, you have to do this province by province. You can't just pick a start and an end destination. They travel 90% slower while they're doing it. So it's not really a thing you necessarily want to do during wartime. But yeah, it is a bit tedious having to do it province by province. So when you look at my entire road map that I've laid out so far, yeah, I had to do each and every one of these province by province. And it was a bit of a pain. So that's something I might suggest that they change. Also, people wanting our trade goods, because we've just taken more territory, which means we have more trade goods available. So we'll speed that up a little bit, I think. We've already gotten rid of a fair chunk of that aggressive expansion. That's not bad. And it's telling me I've got no commander there. And it's telling me this province is disloyal because we've just conquered it. They're not very happy. They're a different culture. They're a different religion. And fortunately, the governor policy isn't exacerbating that because some of the governor policies can increase unrest. So we might get some rebellious stuff happening here. It depends. Right, let's have a look. Don't know if any of these are particularly... Let's just go for one of the Omen duration ones, because that's only been had a 10% bonus up till now. And the reason why I've gone with this this save I've played some of already, and hopefully you kind of seeing that a bit more now that I've shown off some of the stuff you can do in this game, is that what I'm doing now versus what I was doing at the start of the game isn't really too different. Rome starts off, it's one of the easy starts for a reason. You start off with a lot of manpower, you start off with some decent potential military ideas, and you start off with a lot of weaker neighbours essentially. Are roads for movement only, or do they improve trade? That is a very good question. I don't know. If they improve trade, it doesn't tell me. Compared to, say, EU4, it actually feels a bit lacking in terms of tooltips. And there's also some of the map modes that are conspicuously lacking. So if I want to see the economic distribution, like I can see the population distribution, I can kind of get a heat map of like see Rome, for instance, by far the most populous place I have. But I can't do the same for the economic value. There's a trade good map mode, but unlike EU or CK2, there's no kind of alternate. Because they actually did that with CK2, which I thought it took me a little while to figure out, but it was kind of a smart way of doing it. They streamlined the map modes a bit, whereby you could, by left clicking or right clicking on the map, you could actually see different information as a kind of subheading of the map mode you were looking at. But it doesn't do that with this game. So yeah, there's some things missing, which it might be useful to have. So I can't see, like, you know, if there's disease rampant, or although disease doesn't really seem to be a thing in this game. Characters can get sick, but I've yet to see any epidemics or anything. There are disasters, but they don't seem to be like not long after you start the game you get the eruption of Vesuvius. Was it Mount Etna? I can never remember. No, it is Vesuvius, isn't it? And a lot of the population of Pompeii dies as just like a pop-up event. And you can also get occasional random events where you can have like a coastal town gets swamped, or a building collapses or something like that, and you have to pay some gold or pay some manpower to fix it. But yeah, in terms of, like, if you're hoping for kind of Reaper's Due style disease mechanics from CK2, that isn't here, but it might be something they have on the cards. Because at the moment your population just seems to grow and grow and grow. Disease doesn't really seem to be a factor, which would absolutely have been the case. I'm sure Roman hygiene was a lot better than the hygiene of a lot of other places, but still, yeah. But I mean, I think once this comes out, once modders get their hands on it, I mean, the fact that there are only 4 different types of buildings, for example, I suspect that people will immediately start modding things like that. And I suspect we might see people doing things with, I don't know, different types of military units, or I don't know. I don't know what the modders might do with this game. I think there's a lot of potential, and I can certainly see a lot of potential with DLC down the line as well. Right, they have finished building this road, so we'll just keep linking up my different roads. One thing roads don't seem to do is affect the attrition limit on a province. So if they have any effect on trade, I don't know. It doesn't show it anywhere if they do. But they definitely don't have an effect on attrition. It just seems to be unit movement speed. So, let's make a new friend, shall we? In Subria. Let's try and do something diplomatic. Now, I've still got a bit of a malice from my aggressive expansion claim, but what we can do is... Oh, we can't actually improve it that much. Okay, we'll have to pick a different target. Does Veneto still have that? Minus 1,000... Yeah, they do. Who else is on my borders that I could potentially... Lepontia. Right, we haven't really done much with them, so we can improve opinion. And unlike EU, where that's basically capped, you can have different things modify that, so you can actually have it go up by over 100 potentially. And we could also send just a lump sum of cash for a fixed 25 opinion bump. But it's only up to a maximum of 25. You can't ever have it go over 25 from sending cash to somebody. Right, another invention. And let's actually take the other omen duration thing that we have available. And you'll see that because I've got text that are kind of stacked further down, as it were, it's immediately filled that back up again. So I don't know. I think this could use some work, the text system particularly. Right, the censor's office and the Cornelii family. He's actually not bad. Let's go for him. Mamercus Cornelius Scipio. And that's still just that. That's fine. Honestly, with the government types, you get various bonuses depending on which faction is in command, but I've not really... I don't know, I've not particularly seen the benefit of... I mean, I suppose if you're at war, for instance, it's very useful if you have the military faction controlling the government, because you get like a morale boost from that, for example. So you might want to try and stack the military faction in the Senate ahead of going to war with somebody, especially if they are at a more equal power base to you. But otherwise, just in the moment-to-moment of the game, it doesn't seem to make that much of a difference. I mean, a lot of the game can be made pretty hands-off. You can even, and I've already said, you can assign armies to different provinces. You can actually, much like EU4 and the orders you can give to ships, and you can also tell units that you want to set them on rebel bashing duty. Well, they've actually expanded on that. So ships have different orders, just like they did in EU4, but I don't know why I'm moving the map around as I'm doing this, but you can automate your armies. So you can set them to defend borders, fight rebels, you can set them to patrol, you can set them to stay away from enemy units. So at the moment I've been doing it all myself, but yeah. Yeah, that was quite sad news, Bobbles. It was yeah, it was a lot of people that got touched by that, really. hearing about Cyberwraith dying, and I don't want to say almost a surprising amount, but it was heartening. I'll put it that way. He touched a lot of lives. Right, we're almost done with this road building. I suspect the terrain that you're building through does have an effect on how long it takes, but the actual amount of manpower that you throw at it seems to make no difference whatsoever. 2 10,000 stacks, or even 10 1,000 stacks, seem to build roads just as quickly as a single 20,000 stack. I'm not sure why they haven't made that scale, but maybe practically speaking, it doesn't really matter that much. Right, we're going to have an election soon, and it'll be actually a leader of the military faction, or the leader of the military faction. Right, this is a fairly frequent event, and it's often useful to actually figure out where the provinces in question are. So, the denizens of the shining city of Fundi have been feuding with their neighbours in Fregele. As a result, an impressive fortified wall is being erected in Fundi, quite outdoing the efforts of their rival. Oh, I thought this was going to be... Sometimes you get like a dispute between two neighbouring cities, and you have to kind of like assign land to one of them, and one of them gets like a tax benefit, in which case it's better to give it to the one that's generating the higher tax to begin with, which is not a thing that you can actually see with the map modes. But no, in this case it is basically a free fortification, and this province doesn't have anything built, so yeah, you don't seem to have to pay maintenance for buildings, you just pay the upfront cost. And occasionally you'll get events like that which give you a building for free. So what we can do is even use up the rest of these building spots. So let's build a marketplace and a granary. And marketplaces obviously give you a bit more tax, but they also increase the civilization level, and that's not a thing I've talked about yet. And granaries affect your population growth and slave happiness. So yeah, civilization level. Oh, I've got another. Characters are constantly dying. It's one of the kind of slightly busy work things the game gets you to do, is keep filling up your spots as characters cycle through. Right, the Fabii family. He can be the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest. So, civilization level. There is actually a thing for this, I believe. Civilization map mode. Here we go. So this is essentially how developed your provinces are. Now there is a cap that's based on technology, but also the marketplaces have an effect as well. They basically give you a % per marketplace, because you can stack buildings. There's only 4 different kinds of building, but you can stack them in order to specialize provinces. So if I wanted to, I've actually got a building slot available in Rome, which is due to population. The amount of building slots you have does seem entirely tied to population. So what I could do is actually build another marketplace, which would increase the commercial value of Rome, or I could build a granary, which would make my slaves happier, which is probably not a bad idea actually, because Rome does have a high slave population. So I think we'll do that. Get that slight benefit. So, there is a... Oh, that's what I was going to show. The overall civilization value is capped and will grow over time as you get technology up. And it's not necessarily a thing you want if you're playing as one of the more tribal... Oh, Caledonia is surprisingly civilized. Yeah, if you're playing as one of the more tribal powers, because it actually makes your tribesmen pops unhappy. Their happiness is affected by your civilization level. But the freeman and citizen pops are positively affected by civilization level. And it also, I think, affects things like tax revenues. Or I'm not actually entirely sure what other effects it has. Supply limit is one of them. Here we go. It does actually list them. Barbarian growth, which I'm not entirely sure what that mechanic is about as relating to the individual provinces. I think that only really matters if you're bordering provinces where barbarians can spawn. But mostly it seems to affect the happiness of civs, of your pops, not civs. Don't know where that came from. But yeah, I think in terms of the barbarians thing, it only really matters if it's bordering one of the places where barbarians can spawn, which you can actually look up on the map. This is basically impassable terrain, and it's not all impassable terrain, but it's at different spots of some of the impassable terrain where periodically barbarians will spawn and attack your provinces, basically. So you want to have an army relatively close by. In fact, we could actually get this army a lot closer than that. Park them there, maybe. Also, this guy needs an order to build a road. So, yeah, the civilization thing seems to be a bit... It seems to be more kind of keeping track of your overall development than having lots and lots of different gameplay implications. You can possibly... I don't know what word I'm looking for there. You can definitely play a low civ value nation and actually get benefits out of it if you are heavily going for tribesmen as your kind of primary population unit. And population, by the way, that's actually, I think, one of the nicer mechanics of the game. I think they've actually done that pretty well, the way you manage it, because you can manually promote and assimilate different types of population. Now, it's not going to matter for Rome so much, although we do actually have some immigrants, some Hebrew Jewish immigrants. We can convert them by spending our mana. We can assimilate their culture by, again, spending our mana. A different type, it's the civic, oratory power. You can also just send them around at will. And also, this is an event that can happen. I have some tribesmen appearing across the border. The tribesmen pops will actually migrate around a bit. They will cross borders sometimes. So we've actually benefited from somebody else losing some population there. Depending on this, they'll have different happiness levels depending on their culture and their religion. But what you can do, because they have different effects, you can basically, if you have the power, like right now, I could promote everybody to be a citizen, and that would significantly boost my research. Like, I could do that for an entire nation, for an entire population. I could make everybody citizens, and I would have so much research power, but that would have a huge effect on my manpower pool, because you get a lot of manpower from both freemen and tribesmen. And slaves as well give you a lot of economic output, so I could free all the slaves. But I wouldn't get as much tax, and also slaves have an effect on if you're producing... if you have enough slaves in a province, you will produce extra resources from that province. And that gives you more trade power, because you can export that to other people and make more money. So, more technologies. Fabricate claim cost. Aggressive expansion impact -5%. Let's go with that one. We need a researcher, and you get some research even if you don't have somebody suitable. With a, I was going to say a court there. With a court my size, no, this isn't CK2. With a family, a group of families the size that Rome has, you're never going to run out of characters to fill the different slots. But actually with the smaller tribal nations, yeah, it's possible. You can end up with slots unfilled, armies without generals, just because you don't have enough characters. So the Postumi family, they're right up the top there, and he's a +8, so we'll put him in there. And also we have a title to fill, and again we'll see which one is this? Oh, this one's actually related to tax income, so we know what, we'll just go for straight up ability rather than trying to make one of the families happy, which is sort of the same in CK2. You could either keep a powerful vassal happy by appointing them to the the council, even if they weren't necessarily the best qualified, or you could just straight up be a bit more meritorious and or meritocracy focused and appoint the most able people, even if that might then piss other people off. The Latin state of Venetian revolts has just given me some money. Yeah, people will try and curry favour by sending you cash. Oh, it's this one province that's revolting. That might actually work out for me. If they successfully are able to break away, then yeah. Right, I could take the aggressive expansion change, but what we'll do is we'll go with the national unrest, the blessing of Fortuna, and that might help pacify these provinces over here where, yeah, we do actually have some unrest going on. We might get rebels. Filthy rebel scum. I'll build that last road there. Don't know if there's any other roads we particularly want to build. Maybe over here, actually. Yeah, let's build a road up there. I'm trying to connect all the capitals and make sure, especially as this is a hot spot that can spawn barbarians. At least I think that one is. Yeah, that one is. Having the road access is quite useful. But, you know, roads are able to be used by everybody, so it's a double-edged sword. Building lots of infrastructure. Hey, Jammy. And Evil Tim with the resub. Does the AI bother much with roads? I think... where are we? Oh, yes, this is the right thing. I think it's only the Italian military idea group that gets roads. This is basically EU4 ideas, like the idea trees that you could get. Carnia wants military access. Sure, why not? Might as well take the free reputation bump that'll give. So not everybody gets the potential to build roads. I think it's only people that are starting with this Italian military idea tradition. Tree? I don't know what to call it exactly. You have to go down each branch separately. You can't kind of choose that one and choose that one and choose that one. I'm not entirely sure why they've done it like that, but they don't necessarily tie into each other, and it's some of them like the next one I'm going for is the ability to have my armies build border forts as a thing in the same way that they can build roads. So I'm curious to see what that's like, because I might spam some forts along here, for example. So there's another character event for the console. Members of the mercantile faction have something of reputation regarding the price of their support. So, we can basically bribe the mercantile faction. And if I do anything that requires the support of the Senate, they will be much more likely to agree. So we'll do that because we have oodles and oodles of cash. We're drowning in the denarii. Denarii? I don't know what the plural of the Roman currency would be. And my general is... oh no, this is the consul. My consul is depressed, but I can seek treatment, which just seems to flat always cost 100, regardless of personal funds or like the size of your nation or anything like that. So it's actually really hard to do when you're playing one of the tribals. You don't have the funds most of the time. So, yeah, we may get an event popping up that's been successful. Stuff can be cured on its own. Sometimes you get things that cannot be cured that are generally going to end the life of the character. But so far, I haven't really gotten that attached to any of the individual characters or families. You don't interact with them in the same way at all as CK2. They don't really build up the same kind of stories that they do in CK2. Right, we've just lost the governor of Transalpine Gaul, so we can... who can we choose? Flevii, Valerii. The Valerii family is one that requires a bit of cozying up to. So, yep, we'll appoint him the governor. Now, one thing I could do, this particular vassal here, they're not contributing that much. I could potentially diplo annex them to use the CK2, not CK2, the EU4 term, or just the EU term. Although the Senate isn't really behind that, so we could force it through, but it would incur tyranny. But, you know, they contribute some troops. 11k troops is more than I would be able to effectively get out of having just those 2 extra provinces. The Venetian Revolt wants military access. Sure, you know, why not? Now, what I can do is build some more armies. I think we have more than enough cash on hand to support maybe another 10k stack, or I could even make this a 20k stack. And this is, again, very similar to the EU games. What should we have? Yeah, let's just beef up this army here. Get some more light infantry. And let's get some more auxiliary cavalry and see where that takes us up to. You can also build troops. I mean, you can build them directly. No, that's not what I wanted to do. You can build them directly from the provinces. And again, this is just like EU4, or you can use the outliner to recruit your troops. You can also directly construct buildings, although it doesn't tell you, and this is another little niggle with the UI, there are a couple of them. It tells you provinces where buildings can be built, but it doesn't tell you how many you have built of that already, or even if you built any at all, with the exception of forts, which have their own symbol on them on the map. So I can see if I've built a fort somewhere already, but I can't see if I've already built a marketplace or a granary. I might not necessarily want to build another one. So that's slightly annoying. You can also do the religious conversion of populations, assimilation, and have a kind of overview of your trade goods from the outliner as well. In fact, it's showing as green, but I think that means we have exports available from Latium rather than imports. Right, so another technology. It's overall, it's rather, you know, it's good enough. Most of my problems with this are kind of fairly minor, to be honest, with the information the game could be giving me, but isn't. It's not as bad as, say, Stellaris, where it was arguably holding back vital information from you at game launch. Navy attrition minus 10%. Sure, why not? And Veneto has given me some cash. They're not even an actual tributary. Tributaries give you... this is one of the kinds of kind of vassal. You've got your kind of tribal vassals, you've got tributaries, and you can actually have client states if they are a republic of some sort or a democracy of some sort. And lots of them, I think all of them in fact, contribute some manpower and some cash on an ongoing basis. But people will also just give you gifts because they want your opinion of them to be better. Veneto wants military access. They want to go and bash the rebels. I'm almost tempted to say no. I'm actually going to decline that offer. Anyway, so we are appointing... Let's just appoint the best person. And oh, that is actually a separate province. Just that one little... I control that one part of this province. There's no... as far as I can tell, in terms of the land you control, unlike CK2, there's no natural processes going on in the background of culture shift and religion shift and kind of like de jure claims and all that kind of thing. It doesn't operate in anything like the same way. The only thing that you can have going on in the background, kind of, is if your governor decides to select a province policy. None of them actually are at the moment, but they can have either religious conversion or cultural assimilation as a province policy, which will shift some of the population. But it doesn't just seem to happen over time by itself. Oh, I did, and then I forgot to reply, Jammy, because I'm organised like that. But yeah, I did see that, and I am thinking about it. So, yes, in answer to your question, yes, I have read it. Right, so I actually have... I've been kind of making my stacks around 20k. It seems like having big stacks affects you in terms of attrition fairly quickly. So it's you don't want them too big. And we can actually reunite that bit with that bit. We'll march them over there, which won't take too long. But yeah, let's have some equites and maybe another cohort of archers. Sagittarii, or however one pronounces that. Right, they want some trade goods, and I will give them trade goods. I am getting so much money from trade goods. It's a little bit ridiculous. The flickering bars. That's a graphical... Like this here, you mean? Yeah, that's a graphical glitch. I think that's one they know about. It seems to occur in a lot of the progress bars. Again, review code... more or less finished, but still some rough edges. So I don't know if there's that much more to show you really at this point. I think I've talked about most of the things there are to talk about. One thing I haven't done yet is clash with another major power. I mean, we can take a look at the... oh, here we go. So... I was successfully treated, or one of the other characters successfully treated themselves, and that's another one of those events that we had earlier. So it's 10% to Freeman output for 2 particular provinces. But yeah, let's pause it for a second. So I am top of the tree, but actually Cantassia, who is busy taking over all of Britain. It's about like 1,000 years too early for that. In fact, more than 1,000 years too early for that. But whatever. Yeah, they're actually in second place. They're probably getting to be quite civilized at this point. Then we've got Myuria, Chera, Macedon. Carthage is actually quite low down by this point. Carthage hasn't really done much in terms of expanding. So I haven't particularly been fighting anybody outside of my own borders. Transporting troops via ship is essentially like it is in EU or CK2. Or more like EU actually, only you really just only have one type of ship. There's no separate transport fleets. So, you know, I could do that. I could go and take on Macedon. But, yeah, apart from that, I think I've done most of what there is to do at this point. But there might be things later down the line where there are different mechanics involved that I just haven't encountered yet. I think I'm going to just keep expanding, and probably not as aggressively as I could be. Like, I could have gone back to war again already. My aggressive expansion has already dropped to 0. But I've been trying to play the diplomacy game a little bit as well, just for a bit of variety. So, yeah, I'll keep expanding. Maybe head west, take out Spain and, you know, Gaul, and then head for Greece. And I think there was an event that popped up for Rome, which basically gives me claims on Greece, so I don't even have to fabricate claims. I've already got claims on Macedon. Yeah, Macedon's been gobbling up Greece. Sparta's holding out a bit. We've got Phrygia, which is one of the Alexandrian successor states, clinging on, although it's not doing as well as it was. I think Pontus is another one of them. The Seleucids seem to have almost completely collapsed. Yeah, Seleucids, the Seleucid Empire doesn't do that well. It's large. It has many diverse nationalities. In it? It has lots of borders to defend. Probably lots of rebel problems. Probably lots of civil war problems. I've avoided civil wars as Rome so far, but I had a couple when I was playing as Caledonia. Civil wars can get messy, very messy. So it's almost worth like doing your utmost to avoid them. But I was kind of letting it happen a bit with Caledonia just to see what would happen. I mean, you never really want a civil war in a Paradox game, but it can make life a bit interesting and spicy at times. So, is there anything anybody particularly wants to see before I wrap this up? Because I think I'm getting to the stage of wrapping this up. My voice is going a little bit, and it has been an hour and a half already. All-out nuclear war. Sadly, that isn't an option. But again, just wait till the modders get their hands on it, Jammy, and who knows? It might be like Age of Empires, where you could spawn in a guy with a laser, or cars. Have any tribes already migrated? This is a thing I don't think I've directly mentioned, but there are different kinds of tribes. So if I look at Cantiasia, for example, they are a settled tribe. And if you're playing as a settled tribe, or indeed as a migratory tribe, and I should be able to find one over here, you will have an option in the decisions to swap between those two kinds of tribal government. I haven't tried playing as a migratory tribe yet, but I suspect what it will mean is that you can, is it EU4 that lets you do this with certain of the North and South American native groups, where you can, I think, just move your population from province to province. So you know what? We could try that right now. So I'm going to save game. We'll boot up a new game and we'll select a migratory tribe, and we'll actually see what that does right now. So single player, new game. That's the one thing I haven't tried yet. There are different forms of republic government as well. I mean, the Carthaginians start out with an oligarchic republic, but you can become essentially more like a trading republic. You also have a kind of theological republic as an option. Don't know if that's Egypt's. No, they're just an aristocratic monarchy. As is Phrygia, Seleucids, Mauria. Yeah, different kinds of monarchies. And then you get more of the kind of European tribes. So let's have a look at somewhere where it's next to some provinces where you could potentially... Bastania. This is the starting options, by the way. There's not a huge number of them. You can have the difficulty setting. You've got Iron Man mode. You can launch into observer mode, which I've just done accidentally. I didn't mean to do that. That automatically starts the game. As I didn't mean to. Yeah, well done me. But you can also essentially have CK2's option of allowing both character genders to do whatever with this mixed gender rules button. In static rules, the gender equality of your country will be predetermined. So I think for some of the tribal ones, you get more of a mixed bag with the roles that women are able to take up, but you have to specifically click that button if you're playing as Rome, for example, to be able to have women take up roles. It's not like CK2 where you can shift your laws over time. I don't think there are any kind of relevant gender equality anything in the laws screen. It's all just different modifiers rather than actual policy changes. So one thing I didn't even show was colonization. I might go back to the game at the very beginning to show you that. But yeah, how does it work with being a migratory tribe? Now the actual colonize button, you have to have 10 pops basically. But we don't have that, and I think also a certain amount of civilization value. I can't remember if that's a factor or not. But what do I do no, we have one decision, form tribal kingdom. That's not it. How do I migrate my migratory tribe? How does this work? Oh, ideas. I didn't even touch on national ideas, but yeah, this is a thing as well. Again, it's just various bonuses that you can use to fine-tune what you want your play style to be like. Now this is a different military tech tree, but no roads here. Although that's a raise levies ability. That's the thing I don't think the Romans get access to. I don't know. I would have to look that up. I think I did have a look through the guidance document they sent, and I don't think it specifically mentioned the difference. Maybe it comes through event pop-ups. I don't really know. Also, terra incognita. I mean, the impassable terrain. This is, you know, true impassable terrain, and this is just provinces that can be settled but aren't. They don't necessarily, like, they're not completely empty. Like, they actually do tend to have some population, and sometimes they can actually be quite populated, but I'm guessing they're supposed to be, like, you know, really minor tribes. Although that one there, no population. Oh no, actually I'm looking in the wrong place. It does have 2 tribes. I don't know if there's anywhere that truly has no population aside from the impassable terrain areas. Anyway, I will very quickly show you colonization as well, because that's the thing. I'll have to figure out migratory tribes, how they are. Like there must be some difference in the. There's no, like in CK2, you've got the little thing in the corner you can click, and it tells you, it kind of outlines for you the actual effects of your government type and whatever. But I don't see that there is such an option here. Right, Caledonia. Let's have a look. How is the weather? The weather is very nice today, Jammy. I think we're due for about 15 degrees. It's probably about that right now outside. It's reasonably warm. So, yeah, this is... Do I actually have any provinces that can colonize right now? I think... Right, I think what we can do, just for the purposes of demonstrating... as with CK2, as with EU4, your provinces have a dominant culture and religion. Because this is a predominantly Hibernian province, or this subunit of this province, we can't actually colonize. It seems like only your primary culture pops can actually go and colonize. So what we have to do first, before we can click that button, is I have to go and spend a bunch of oratory. And is that going to be enough? No, I think I have to... Oh no, that's now shifted to being picked. Oh, but we don't have 10 pops. It'll be one of the other Well, what we can do... We still have some Hibernian tribesmen. We haven't completely assimilated the culture, but it's now shifted the dominant culture. And again, like a lot of the game, it's just you click a button, the thing happens instantly. But what we can do is we can say shift this pop into Voluntia Orientalis. This now has... I can't count. No, that's 5. That's 7. I've picked completely the wrong province to try doing that with. Right, this population here is big enough. So, I can't count, that's all. Right, that's now picked. I should now be able to move one of those pops. And that's it. That's colonization. It's super simple. It doesn't really involve anything other than that. You can't colonize... like I couldn't colonize down here, for example. If you have like this province here would be able to help, or I might not actually be able to. Maybe if it's within 2 adjacent sea zones or something like that, it can colonize, but that might not actually fit that rule. Yeah, 2 cities sharing a sea zone count as adjacent. Right, that's it. So that's how you're able to. That's how I was able to colonize the Isle of Man, for example. But yeah, I think a lot of people aren't going to like this aspect of this game. The more veteran fans of Paradox games, I suspect the fact that you just click a button and a thing happens instantly is going to put some people off. So yeah, I think that's it really. I don't think there was any other. Let me just check. Any other questions? I mean, just looking at this one, I don't know if any of these migratory tribes really have moved around much. So I might have to go and specifically ask my contact at Paradox about the mechanics of migratory tribes. There's clearly supposed to be something different going on there, but I don't know how it's supposed to be working exactly. Otherwise, well, I think this just about wraps it up. This has been fairly, you know, not particularly comprehensive, but I've tried to give an overview of how it works, the game. So hopefully you get some sense of what the game is. It might change a little bit here and there between now and release, which I think... What date did they say? I don't know if I'm allowed to even say what date they're aiming for, but it's not that close. It's a little ways off. So there is definitely enough time for them to work on some things here and there. They're doing a fairly decent amount of lead into this in terms of the launch, which is, you know, it's fine. It's quite nice. It gives people plenty of time to know whether they're going to like the game in advance or not. Anyway, so yeah, hopefully you have found this stream useful though, and you know, been maybe a little entertained as well. If you missed any of it, I will stick it up on YouTube. But otherwise, I hope you enjoy the nice sunny weather, if you happen to be having nice sunny weather wherever you are, and I shall catch you next time.